At 73 years old, I learned the cruelest truth a father can ever face. My own daughter had told the world I was dead. Not because I was sick, not because I had passed away quietly in my sleep, but because in her eyes having a carpenter for a father was too shameful for the polished, wealthy life she wanted to show off. Now let me stop right here and ask, can you imagine that? Can you imagine being buried alive by lies erased from your own family's history, treated like a ghost who never deserved to be remembered? If you've ever been cast aside or betrayed by someone you raised, someone you loved, with everything you had, then you already know how deep this kind of wound cuts. My name is Harold Green, and this is my story. I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, and for 50 years I worked with wood and iron. Some men chase stocks, others chase status. Me, I chased the sound of a hammer striking true, the smell of cedar shavings on the shop floor, the feeling of running my hands along a chair I'd built that I knew would outlast me. I wasn't a rich man, but I was an honest one. My hands are rough-scarred, the kind of hands that tell you stories before my mouth even opens. These hands built boats that carried families down rivers, porches where children took their first steps, coffins that laid neighbors to rest with dignity. And with these same hands, I paid every dollar of my daughter Caroline's education, college, law school, the whole way through. I was proud that my sweat could buy her a future. But somewhere along the line, Caroline decided sweat wasn't enough. She married Martin Ellis, a lawyer from a wealthy Charleston family. They bought a house in Harbor View Estates, where the driveways are circular, the lawns are manicured by men in uniforms, and the yachts at the marina gleam like white teeth in the Carolina sun. It was a world where pearls weren't accessories, they were armor. And in that world, a father who still smelled faintly of sawdust and varnish didn't belong. I'll never forget the day she came into my workshop, heels clicking against the old pine floor like gunshots. She looked around at the sawdust, at the half-finished boat hull I was sanding, at the jars of nails and screws stacked neatly on the shelves, and she wrinkled her nose like she'd stepped into a barnyard. "Daddy," she said, "I need you to understand something. People in Martin's circle, they have expectations. I've worked too hard to build this life to have it dragged down by this." She gestured around my workshop, the place that had kept food on her plate and books in her bag. "This is who I am, Caroline," I told her. "This is who raised you." Her eyes were cold as steel. "Then maybe it's better if we keep our distance until you figure it out." That was the last real conversation we had. What I didn't know then was that Caroline wouldn't just keep her distance, she would erase me entirely. Within 2 years, she was telling neighbors, friends at the country club, even her own children, that her father had died in a car accident. She wrote an obituary. She gave speeches about overcoming the loss of her beloved father. She raised donations in my name. And while she was being praised for her strength and resilience, I was still alive, still breathing, still sanding planks in that same workshop, wondering why my letters kept coming back, return to sender. So here I stand, 73 years old, a man who was buried alive not by dirt, but by shame that wasn't even mine to carry. And if you've ever been betrayed by blood, if you've ever been told you weren't good enough by the very people who should have loved you without condition, then I promise you, this story will hit home. Because what I did when the truth finally came out, well, it turned her entire perfect world upside down. Hit subscribe, because this story is about to get far darker before it gets better. After that day in the workshop, life became quieter. Too quiet. You don't notice the silence at first it creeps in. First, it's the missing phone calls, then the empty holidays, then the birthdays where no card ever comes back. Eventually, you find yourself sitting at a table built for 4 eating soup alone, convincing yourself that tomorrow the phone might ring. But tomorrow never came. For a while I kept trying. Letters, phone calls, Christmas cards. Each one came back stamped, "Return to sender." I started a box, a banker's box, I kept in the closet where I filed every single envelope by year. 1999, 3 letters returned. 2002, Christmas card and gift returned. 2010 graduation card for my granddaughter returned unopened. 25 years of rejection stacked like service records. My late wife Margaret used to beg me to stop. Harold, she'd whisper at night when she caught me writing another letter, "She's made her choice. Don't break your heart twice." But I couldn't stop. A father doesn't stop loving because love isn't returned. A father hopes. When Margaret passed 10 years ago now, Caroline didn't come to the funeral. How could she? She'd told the world her father had died long before. If she walked in with me standing there, the whole lie would have crumbled. So I buried the woman I loved with my own 2 hands, and I walked back into that silent house knowing my daughter would never know her mother was gone. There are nights when that truth still breaks me, but let me tell you something. In those nights of silence, I held on to the only thing I knew was unshakable, my faith. I remember sitting alone in that wooden church down the road, my hands resting on the same pew I'd polished decades ago. I prayed the same prayer over and over, "Lord, give me patience. Give me strength to endure this silence. And if my daughter cannot see me as her father, then let me at least remain the man you made me to be." Because here's the truth. Faith doesn't erase pain. It doesn't fill an empty chair or bring back a voice that refuses to call. But it does give you the strength to stay standing when life knocks you flat. It gives you something solid when the world has declared you invisible. And I needed that strength, because in the years that followed, I was treated like a ghost in my own hometown. I'd walk into the hardware store and see old neighbors whisper, "Didn't Caroline's father die years ago?" At the gas station, someone I'd known since grade school would double take, then look away quickly, like they'd seen an apparition. Even my grandkids, 2 children I'd never met, grew up believing I'd been gone before they could walk. Their school essays talked about a grandfather they never knew, a man who died young. Imagine reading those words written by children carrying your blood while you're still alive, to feel the sting of every sentence. It was like watching the world rehearse your eulogy while you sat in the back pew. So I worked. I kept building tables, repairing boats, carving crosses for the churchyard. I poured my grief into the grain of wood. Some men drink, some men lash out. Me, I sanded, I carved, I built. And every time the sawdust rose in the air, I told myself, this is what's real. This is what lasts. Not the lies, not the shame, but the work of these hands and the God who gave them strength. I never stopped believing, though truth be told, I came close. And then 25 years later, the phone finally rang. A voice I hadn't heard since she was in her 20s, dripping with sugar. "Now, Daddy, I've been thinking about you so much. Maybe it's time we put the past behind us." For a moment, my heart leapt. For a moment, I thought my prayers had been answered. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I had already discovered something about her life that would make your blood run cold. And that, my friend, was the moment I realized God may be patient, but He also delivers truth in His own time. It was a Tuesday morning in late October when the phone rang. I almost didn't pick up. At 73, most of the calls I get are from old friends checking in or bill collectors who can't seem to understand that I pay with checks, not apps. But this call, it wasn't either of those. Mr. Green, a man's voice said, "My name is Daniel Foster, attorney with Foster and James in Savannah. I'm calling with news regarding your cousin Raymond Green, Raymond. My cousin, the one person who still sent me Christmas cards even after everyone else stopped. He'd moved to Savannah years ago, said he wanted to smell the sea before his bones turned brittle. We'd talk now and then, two old men trying to convince each other we were still relevant. I braced myself for bad news. Raymond passed away last week," the lawyer continued. "A sudden stroke. I'm sorry." The words sank in heavy. Another person gone. Another empty chair in my already hollow circle. But then came the words that made my breath catch. "Mr. Green, your cousin, left very specific instructions. You are the sole heir to his estate. That includes 3 boutique hotels in Savannah's historic district, several waterfront properties, and his entire investment portfolio. The estimated value of the estate is $9.1 million. I gripped the phone tighter. "I'm sorry, did you say?" "9 millions. Yes, sir." Mr. Green was a very successful man. He wanted you to know he respected how you lived your life quietly, honestly. He said you were the only family member who never pretended to be something you weren't. $9 million. My knees almost gave out right there in the kitchen. For decades, I'd lived on the modest earnings of my workshop. My most extravagant purchase in 50 years was a second-hand Ford truck. And now suddenly, I was wealthier than the very people who had erased me. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. I sat at my table that night staring at Margaret's picture, whispering, "Can you believe this, sweetheart? After all the years of scraping by, after all the nights we prayed for just enough, now this." But secrets like that don't stay hidden long. 3 days later, the Savannah Herald ran a business story: local hotel magnate leaves $9.1 million estate to cousin in Charleston. There it was, my name in black and white, the dollar amount underlined for the world to see. By Friday morning, the whispers had started. At the diner, the waitress gave me free coffee on the house Mr. Green. At the hardware store, the manager suddenly offered to carry my lumber. Even neighbors who hadn't spoken to me in years started dropping by just to see how I was doing. And then Sunday night the call came. I didn't recognize the number, but when I answered, the voice sent a shiver through me. "Sweet as honey, careful as silk." "Daddy," she said. "It's me. Caroline." For a moment I couldn't speak. 25 years of silence broken just like that. "I heard about cousin Raymond," she went on quickly. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I know how much he meant to you. And, well, I heard about the inheritance too. Daddy, I've been thinking about you so much lately, about how we've wasted time apart. Martin and I would love to have you join us for Thanksgiving. The children are so excited to finally meet their grandfather." Her words rolled over me, practiced and polished, like lines from a script. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I thought about all those letters in my banker's box. 25 years of rejection. 25 years of birthdays, graduations, and funerals I'd missed. And now suddenly, she was excited for me to meet the grandchildren, who believed I'd been dead their whole lives. I cleared my throat. That's real nice of you to call Caroline. So you'll think about it, she asked, urgency slipping through the syrup. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up. Then I sat back in my chair and whispered, Lord, if this is a test, give me the wisdom to see through it. Because one thing was certain, Caroline's sudden love had less to do with family and everything to do with 9.1 million reasons. After I hung up that night, I just sat in my chair for what must have been an hour. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock Margaret bought from a flea market 30 years ago. I kept replaying Caroline's words in my head. The children are so excited to finally meet their grandfather. For 25 years, I was nothing but a ghost to those children. A ghost their mother told them had died before they could even form memories. And now suddenly, I was supposed to step into the role smiling at a Thanksgiving table, like none of it ever happened. I don't know about you, but that didn't sit right with me. I walked to the closet, pulled out that banker's box, and set it down on the kitchen table. One by one, I opened those manila folders. Letters dated in my handwriting, some yellowing with age, some still crisp. Every single one stamped "Return to Sender." Christmas cards, unopened birthday gifts, taped shut, graduation notes scrawled with hope. 25 years of trying. 25 years of being erased. I spread them across the table until the wood disappeared beneath the paper. It looked like evidence in a courtroom. My life as a father laid out in exhibits. I whispered to myself, Caroline, you want to pretend the past didn't happen. Well, I've got 25 years of proof that it did. That's when my old friend Jacob stopped by. He runs a bait and tackle shop down the road, one of the few men who stuck by me since Margaret passed. He walked in, saw the letters, and just shook his head. Harold, what in God's name are you doing? He asked. She called me, I said. His eyebrows shot up. After 25 years. Yeah. Wants me at Thanksgiving dinner. Wants me to meet the grandchildren. Jacob let out a low whistle. And I bet that call didn't come until after the paper printed about your inheritance. He was right. I didn't even have to say it. Jacob looked at the letters, then back at me. You gonna go? I leaned back in my chair. I'm thinking about it. You'd better think real careful, he said, because people don't just change overnight. She erased you once, Harold. She might be trying to use you now. And that's the question I want to put to you, yes, you watching or listening right now. If your child cut you out of their life, told the world you were dead, ignored every letter and every phone call for decades, and then came running back the minute you came into money, what would you do? Would you forgive them? Would you sit at their table and pretend like nothing happened? Or would you demand the truth in front of everyone who believed the lies? Leave me a comment. Tell me honestly. Because I know what I chose to do, and it turned Thanksgiving dinner into a day no one at that table will ever forget. Jacob poured himself a cup of coffee, sat across from me, and leaned forward. So what's your move, Harold? I stared at the sea of unopened envelopes between us. I don't know yet. But I do know this. If she wants me back in her life, it won't be on her terms. It'll be on mine. I tapped the letters with my finger. This box, it's my record, my testimony. And if she thinks she can rewrite history, she's about to find out I've been keeping receipts. Jacob gave me a long look, then nodded slowly. Then I guess you'd better start preparing. 'Cause once you walk into that house, there's no going back. I nodded. He was right. And deep down, I already knew this Thanksgiving wasn't going to be about turkey and pie. It was going to be about truth. The next morning, I woke up with a decision burning in my chest. I wasn't going to walk into that Thanksgiving dinner blind. If Caroline wanted to put on a show for her rich friends, then I'd better know what kind of script she'd been reading from all these years. See, one thing about being a carpenter is this: you learn to measure twice, cut once. You don't just trust your eyes, you verify. And that's exactly what I plan to do. I called a man I hadn't spoken to in years. Frank Doyle, an old buddy from the service who now ran a private investigation office out of a little suite above a pawn shop in Charleston. Frank was the kind of man who knew how to dig quietly. He'd been a police detective before he went private, and if there was dirt to be found, Frank could find it without anyone suspecting a thing. "Harold Green," he said when I walked into his office. "Well, I'll be damned. I thought you'd fallen off the map." "Not yet," I told him. "But my daughter seems to wish I had." He raised an eyebrow. That bad, I sat down across from him, the leather chair creaking under my weight, and laid it out plain: the years of silence, the returned letters, the sudden invitation after the inheritance. I didn't sugarcoat any of it. Frank listened, his hands steepled in front of him. Finally, he said, "So what is it you want me to find out? I need to know." I said slowly what Caroline's been telling people about me. Her husband, her friends, the people at that country club of theirs. I want to know the story she's been spinning all this time. Because I can feel it in my bones. It ain't the truth. Frank leaned back, exhaled. "Harold, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes it's better not to know." "Not this time," I said. "This isn't just about me anymore. She's playing a game, and now she's dragging my grandchildren into it. I won't let lies raise them. I want the truth, Frank. Every last piece of it." He nodded slowly. "All right. My rate's $100 an hour plus expenses. I'd say this will take me maybe 20 hours, social digging, background checks, some quiet interviews." "You sure you want to spend that kind of money, just to confirm what you already suspect?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Frank, I've got $9 million sitting in a lawyer's office in Savannah. If spending $2,000 helps me know the truth about my own blood, then it's the best investment I'll ever make." That settled it. He opened a fresh notepad, clicked his pen, and got to work. For the next week, I went about my days as usual, fixing a boat for a neighbor, repairing pews for the church. But my mind kept circling back to Frank. What would he find? How bad would it be Caroline called twice during that stretch? Once to check in on how I was holding up after Raymond's passing. Once to casually mention Thanksgiving again. Both times she dropped references to my good fortune, as though she couldn't keep herself from circling back to the money. Funny thing was, I hadn't even brought it up. I'd hang up the phone and sit at the kitchen table, staring at the box of letters like they were a jury waiting to deliver a verdict. 8 days later, Frank called. His voice was steady, but there was a weight to it. "Harold, I've got what you asked for. But I think we'd better go over this in person. You're going to want to sit down for this." I drove into Charleston the next morning, parked my old Ford between a shiny BMW and a Tesla, and walked up the narrow stairs to Frank's office. He had a folder on his desk, thick, bulging with papers. When I sat down, he slid a photograph across to me. A printout from a Facebook page. Caroline smiling in an evening gown standing beside Martin and their 2 children. The caption read, The Ellis family supporting the Children's Hospital fundraiser in memory of my late father, Harold Green. I froze. Late father. Frank's voice was low. That's just the beginning. He opened the folder, revealing more photos, transcripts, even a copy of a speech. Harold, your daughter didn't just forget you. She buried you. She's been telling people you've been dead since 1998. I sat there in Frank's office staring at those papers, like they were funeral notices for a man still breathing. My own obituary. My own memorial speeches. Pictures of Caroline in pearls, her arm looped through Martin's, smiling for cameras, while using my so-called death to burnish her reputation. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see it in black and white. Frank kept talking, but his voice blurred like a radio out of tune. Words like country club newsletter, charity donations, plaque in the garden. Each one another nail in a coffin I never asked for. Finally, I raised a hand. Stop, Frank froze. You all right, Harold? I pressed my palms together, bowed my head, and whispered, I need a minute. For a long time, I just sat there with my eyes closed. I pictured Margaret's face. I pictured the wooden cross I carved for her grave, the one that still stands steady in the churchyard, even after 10 Carolina winters. I thought about how she'd always told me, don't let bitterness rot you from the inside, Harold. Hold on to your faith. So I prayed right there in that smoke-stained office. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a simple, weary plea. Lord, you see what she's done. You see how she's erased me. Give me the strength not to drown in anger. Give me the courage to face her lies with truth and the wisdom to know how to act. Justice belongs to you, but courage has to belong to me. When I opened my eyes, Frank was watching me carefully. He wasn't a churchman himself, but he understood the look of someone anchoring themselves to something greater. You sure you want to go through with this, Harold? He asked softly. I nodded. For 25 years, I've been silent. For 25 years, I let her lies spread like mold in the dark. But God didn't let me live to 73 just to die in secret. He kept me here for a reason, and maybe this is it. Frank slid the rest of the folder across. Then you'd better see all of it, because this goes deeper than you think. I forced myself to look. Copies of speeches Carolyn gave at legal conferences when I lost my father so young it taught me resilience. A scholarship in my name at a community college. A magazine article titled Turning Grief into Strength by Carolyn Ellis. Every line, every tearful quote, every dollar she donated in my memory was another layer of betrayal. Not just erasing me, but profiting from the erasure. Building her career, her social status, her credibility on the corpse of a father still alive and breathing. When I left Frank's office, the autumn air felt sharper, the sky too bright. I walked into St. Luke's Chapel on Meeting Street, the little church where Margaret and I were married. I hadn't been there in months, maybe longer. The pews were empty. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting red and blue across the worn floorboards. I dropped into the same pew we'd sat in as newlyweds. And for the second time that day, I prayed. Lord, I don't ask you to change Caroline's heart. That's between you and her. But I ask you to steady mine. Don't let me break. Don't let me turn bitter. Let me use this pain for truth, not revenge. Let me be a living witness, not a silent ghost. I sat there until the bells rang noon, the prayer lingering in my chest, like an anchor dropped deep. and as I rose, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just a man betrayed anymore. I wasn't just a carpenter forgotten by his own blood. I was a father armed with truth and guided by faith. And Caroline, well, she was about to learn that the dead don't stay buried forever. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and sharp, the kind of day where the air smells like chimney smoke, and the leaves crunch like brittle paper under your boots. I drove my old Ford pickup down to Harbor View Estates, Jacob riding shotgun. The closer we got, the more out of place that truck looked among the polished Mercedes and gleaming Teslas lined along the circular driveways. Caroline's house wasn't just a house, it was a statement. A $3 million Tudor mansion with marble steps, manicured hedges trimmed into perfect squares, and a front door that probably cost more than my entire kitchen. I paused at the gate, tightening my grip on the steering wheel. "You sure about this?" Harold Jacob asked quietly. I nodded, tapping the leather briefcase on the seat between us. Inside was Frank's folder, photos, articles, speeches, the fake obituary. 25 years of lies organized like courtroom evidence. "Never been more sure," I said. We walked up the stone path. Before I could knock, the door swung open. There stood Caroline in a cream cashmere sweater and pearls that sparkled under the chandelier light. She smiled, her voice dripping honey. "Daddy," she said, throwing her arms around me as if we were actors in some family movie. "I'm so happy you came." Over her shoulder, I caught sight of the living room guests already gathered, crystal glasses and hand laughter echoing like clinking silver. It wasn't just family, it was a performance. Every one of them was dressed like they were posing for a magazine spread. Carolyn turned her voice pitched to Carrie. "Everyone, he's here. My father has arrived." The room went silent. Faces turned, eyes scanning me with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. Some of them I recognized from Frank's photos: country club officials, lawyers, doctors. People who had been told for decades that I was long buried. I stepped inside, Jacob close behind me. "Daddy, I'd like you to meet some dear friends," Caroline said, guiding me forward like a prized exhibit. "This is William Davis, president of the Harbor View Country Club." A tall man with silver hair extended his hand. "Mr. Green, your daughter has spoken so highly of you over the years." I squeezed his hand, forcing a polite smile. "I bet she has. And this is Dr. Richard Martinez and his wife Susan. And over here, the Hendersons. And of course." She turned with a flourish. "Your grandchildren, Sarah and James." Two young adults stepped forward, their eyes unsure, like they were meeting a stranger from a storybook. "Hi, Grandpa," Sarah said softly. I studied her face. Caroline's eyes, but gentler, warmer. My throat tightened. "Hello, sweetheart," I said. Before I could say more, Caroline clapped her hands. "Why don't we all move to the dining room? Dinner is ready." The dining room looked like something out of a royal banquet. A mahogany table long enough to seat 16 Waterford crystal glasses, catching the candlelight china plates rimmed with gold. At the center, a roasted turkey sat like a crown jewel, surrounded by sides that looked more like artwork than food. Caroline seated me at the head of the table, guest of honor. Jacob sat at my side, his flannel shirt looking almost defiant against the sea of silk and tailored suits. When everyone settled, Caroline smiled sweetly. "Daddy, would you do us the honor of saying grace?" The room bowed their heads. I rose slowly, my hand resting on the briefcase by my chair. "Lord," I began, my voice steady. Thank you for this food, this table, and the family gathered here. Thank you for the years you've given me, even when others believed I was gone. Thank you for truth, which always finds its way to the light. And thank you for giving me the chance today to finally speak it. Amen, the guests murmured. But I saw at those puzzled looks the flicker of unease. They'd heard something in my words they didn't understand yet. Dinner began polite conversation, buzzing. Caroline kept steering the talk, painting me as a quiet, modest man, as if she could rewrite me in real time. But my hand never left the briefcase. Because I hadn't come for turkey or pie. I'd come for the reckoning. The meal went on with forced politeness. Guests sipped wine, forks clinked against china, and laughter rose in practiced notes. Caroline floated around the table like a conductor steering conversation away from anything real. Daddy's always been so humble, she said, smiling as she reached to refill my glass. He's never liked to talk about himself. I set the glass down firmly. That's not quite true, Caroline. I've written plenty about myself over the years. Letters, cards, whole pages. The room quieted just a little. A few heads turned toward me. Caroline's smile froze her pearl necklace, trembling with the rise of her chest. Oh, Daddy, you always did have a way with words. I leaned down and pulled the briefcase up, setting it gently on the tablecloth beside my plate. The brass latches clicked open like gunshots in the silence. You know, I thought I'd bring something to share. Caroline's eyes widened. Daddy, what are you, Mr. Davis? I said, looking directly at the country club president. What has my daughter told you about me? He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Well, she's spoken of you often, with admiration. She said you passed some years ago. Passed. I repeated, my voice low. Interesting word choice. Mrs. Henderson chimed in her hands, trembling slightly as she set down her wine. Caroline said you died in a car accident. Back in the 90s, wasn't it? The room went deathly still. I pulled out a folded clipping and slid it down the table. You mean this obituary, the one Caroline wrote herself? Gasps rippled through the room. Guests craned their necks as the paper passed from hand to hand. The date read, March 15th, 1998. My name, my age, cause of death, single car accident on Route 9. Dr. Martinez's wife pressed a hand to her chest. Caroline, what is this? Caroline's face flushed crimson. Daddy, please, this isn't the time. Oh, it's exactly the time, I cut in my voice, carrying over the hushed room. For 25 years, this woman has told the world I was dead. She's given speeches, written articles, raised donations in my memory. I pulled out another paper photographs from a fundraiser. Caroline in a black gown, smiling as she told a crowd she was honoring her late father. She built her reputation on grief that never existed. Guests murmured, some in shock, others in anger. I opened the banker's box I'd hidden under the table. Letters spilled out, envelopes marked, "Return to sender." I spread them across the linen like a deck of cards. And while she was telling all of you that I was 6 feet under, I was here writing, calling, begging to be part of her life. Every letter returned, every gift rejected. 25 years of silence by choice. Sarah, my granddaughter, spoke up softly, her voice trembling. Mom, you told us Grandpa died before we were born. Caroline's face crumpled. Tears slid down, but they weren't the tears of remorse. They were the hot, furious tears of humiliation. You don't understand. You don't know what it was like. I had to protect my family. I couldn't bring him around. He was a carpenter. It didn't fit gasps again. The word carpenter landed heavy like a slur in this polished dining room. I rose from my chair, my voice steady, firm. No, Caroline. I wasn't unfit. I wasn't dangerous. I wasn't unstable. I was the foundation you stood on. These hands built your life, paid for your degree, put a roof over your head. And you buried me alive because you thought sawdust was shameful. Jacob slammed his palm on the table. I've known Harold for 20 years. He's the most honest man I've ever met. And you? He glared at Caroline, turned him into a ghost, just to make yourself look good. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some already standing. Dr. Martinez set down his glass with a sharp clink. Caroline, is this true? She looked around, desperate, but no one came to her rescue. I lifted one last item from the briefcase, a signed check made out for the full $9.1 million. I held it high so every eye could see. This is the fortune you thought you were getting, Caroline. But you won't see a cent. Every dollar is going to fund scholarships for children who've lost parents for real. Children who deserve a chance. Children who've been told their fathers are gone when they are not. The room was silent, heavy as stone. I turned to my grandchildren, my voice softening. You want to know who your grandfather really is, look here. Look at the letters. Look at the truth. I may have been erased, but I was never gone. Then I closed the briefcase, tucked the check into my jacket pocket, and stood tall. Caroline buried me once, but tonight I came back. When I walked out of that dining room, briefcase in hand, the November wind hit me like a wave of cold water. Jacob followed a step behind, silent, his jaw clenched tight. We climbed into my old Ford, the headlights cutting through the manicured hedges of Harbor View Estates. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the engine humming, steady and unashamed, just like the life I'd lived. Finally, Jacob let out a low whistle. Well, Harold, if Thanksgiving was supposed to be about turkey and pie, you sure gave them something they won't forget. I chuckled, but there was no joy in it. She killed me once, Jacob. Tonight I made sure everyone knew I was still breathing. The fallout started almost immediately. By the time I got home, word had already spread across the neighborhood grapevine. Martha, a waitress who worked most of the country club's private events, called Jacob the next morning. You won't believe it, she said. 3 families canceled their Christmas party reservations already. No one wants to be associated with Caroline Ellis right now. By Sunday, the story was all over Harbor View, the daughter who faked her father's death for 25 years, exposed at her own Thanksgiving table. Martin, her husband, didn't take long to act. On November 30th, papers were filed for legal separation. According to Frank's sources, Martin told colleagues he couldn't stay married to someone who'd built an entire social life on a lie so grotesque. It wasn't just the lie he said. It was the performance, the speeches, the donations, the tears at galas. Who does that to their own father? Carolyn tried to salvage her reputation, but the tide had turned. Invitations dried up. The country club board quietly asked her not to attend the Christmas gala. Clients at her law firm began looking elsewhere for representation. One friend told me she was treated like a pariah, her carefully constructed image crumbling in front of her. And me, for the first time in 25 years, I felt light. The check sat folded in my jacket pocket for 2 weeks. Every morning I'd lay it on the table beside my coffee, staring at those numbers, $9.1 million. a sum so large it barely seemed real. I thought about what it could buy: a new house on the water, a luxury car, a retirement where I'd never have to swing a hammer again. But then I'd look at the box of letters. 25 years of return to sender. 25 years of being erased. And I'd remember Caroline's words at the table he was a carpenter. It didn't fit. No. That money was never meant for her. It wasn't meant for yachts or marble kitchens or country club dues. It was meant to tell the truth. So I drove back to Savannah, walked into the law firm that had handled Raymond's estate, and handed Daniel Foster the check. Make it out to the Harold Green Foundation, I said. Scholarships for kids who've lost parents. Training for boys and girls who want to work with their hands. Carpentry, mechanics, masonry. Honest trades. Every dollar goes to them. Daniel blinked. All of it, every cent, I said firmly. My daughter built a reputation on my fake death. I'll build a legacy on my real life. The local paper ran the story a week later. Carpenter donates $9.1 million to children without fathers. There was a picture of me standing in my workshop, calloused hands crossed over my chest, sawdust on the floor. No suits. No yachts. Just truth. And here's the part that matters most. A few days after that article ran, I got a knock on my door. It was Sarah and James, my grandchildren. Sarah's eyes brimmed with tears. "Grandpa," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. We thought you were gone all these years." I swallowed hard, then opened the door wide. "You were lied to, sweetheart. But you weren't the ones who buried me." They came inside. We sat at the kitchen table where I'd spent so many nights alone. I showed them the letters, the cards, the gifts that had never reached them. They read my handwriting, ran their fingers over the envelopes. Sarah sobbed quietly. James just shook his head, stunned, and for the first time in decades, laughter rose in that house again. Not the laughter of polished banquets, but the laughter of family rediscovered. Caroline lost everything she thought she couldn't live without: status, reputation, her husband's respect. But I gained something far greater: the truth, my dignity, and a second chance with the grandchildren who deserved to know me. I may still be just a carpenter. My truck may still rattle when I hit 50. My workshop may still smell of sawdust and varnish. But now every board I cut, every nail I drive feels like a hymn to truth, a hymn to survival. Because in the end, money can build mansions, but truth builds legacies. And I'll take a legacy over a mansion any day. The weeks that followed felt different. For the first time in 25 years, I walked through Charleston without feeling like a ghost. People stopped me on the street not to whisper about my death, but to shake my hand. The article about the donation had spread farther than I imagined. Folks I hadn't seen since high school came by the workshop. One old customer pressed my hand and said, "Harold, you turned betrayal into blessing. Not many men could have done that." But I knew it wasn't just me. Every night when the workshop grew quiet and the sawdust settled, I sat at my table with Margaret's Bible beside me. I traced my finger over the passages she'd underlined. "The truth shall set you free." I realized that was the story of my life. Caroline's lies bound me for decades, but truth told at the right time broke the chains. And faith kept me standing when the weight of those chains nearly crushed me. I won't pretend it was easy. There are nights I still hear her words in my head. He was a carpenter. It didn't fit. And yes, it still stings. But I've come to see something clearer. The world will always measure a man by the wrong standards, by the car in his driveway, the cut of his suit, the circles he runs in. But God measures a man by the calluses on his hands, by the honesty in his work, by the love he gives, even when it isn't returned. And that's enough for me. Sarah and James visit now on weekends. Sometimes they bring friends. They sit in the workshop while I plane down a plank of oak asking questions about Margaret, about the old days, about the way Caroline used to laugh when she was their age. For them, it's like discovering a family album they never knew existed. For me, it's redemption, quiet, steady, and real. Caroline. She called once more 2 weeks after Christmas. Her voice on the machine was cracked full of fury. "Daddy, you destroyed my life, my marriage, my reputation. Call me back." I never called her back. Because here's the truth I want you to hear. Forgiveness doesn't always mean walking back into the fire. Sometimes forgiveness means letting go, releasing the bitterness to God, and then walking forward without chains. Caroline made her choice 25 years ago. She buried me alive. But I don't have to bury myself alongside her. I chose dignity. I chose truth. And I chose faith. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever been erased by someone you love? Have you ever been told you weren't good enough, too poor, too simple, too ordinary for the family or the world you helped build? If you have, I want you to know this: you are more than their lies. You are more than the image they try to erase. With faith, with truth, and with courage, you can rise again even if the world thinks you've been buried. If you believe in second chances, if you believe that God can bring truth to light even after decades of darkness, then walk this journey with me. Subscribe, share your own story, and let's remind the world together that dignity isn't for sale. Because in the end, wealth fades, reputations crumble, and lies rot. But faith builds bridges stronger than marble. Truth outlives the tallest mansion. And love, the real kind, unconditional and steady, cannot be killed, not even by 25 years of silence. I'm 73 years old. My daughter buried me once. But God raised me back to life, not in the ground, but in the hearts of my grandchildren, in the legacy of a foundation that will help children long after I'm gone. And that, my friend, is a resurrection no lie can ever undo.